Okay, while people are flowing in, I'm going to start on the basis that we're on time here. Hello, welcome everybody. I am in Dublin, in Ireland, for the Irish Oscars tomorrow. And very much pleased to be here. This is why I'm in unfamiliar surroundings. So no bookcase in the background, which you'd normally see. I'm in a Dublin hotel. Tomorrow we've got the thought leadership and we've got the Ireland Oscars. Today, though, we've got the 186th thought leadership webinar. How great are the security threats in smart cities? Are they a catastrophe in waiting? Now, I've got to tell you about this. I met one of our panelists in Rotterdam in March this year, and he said to me, we've got to do this topic. It's going to be important. So what I'm going to do in a minute, as is our way, is I'm going to invite the three panelists we got from different parts of the world, covering different parts of this subject matter, to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I will then invite each of them to make an opening statement. 15 minutes when they get to say whatever they want, 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want about the topic. And once they've done that, I'll invite questions and answers from the audience. Now, if you use your question and answer button, the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, I will endeavour to incorporate those questions into the ensuing discussion. Now, do get your question in early so that I can make it a part of the discussion. Without further ado then, let's go and meet our panelists. And first of all, Kelly, whose idea this was, all the way from Washington. Kelly, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning and good evening to everybody, wherever you are around the world. Name's Kelly Stewart, President and CEO of Newcastle Consulting. We're a global security consulting firm here in Washington, D.C., but we concentrate a lot on security assessments and assessments of all kind. I'll keep it to that simplicity in terms of what we'll discuss today. So that is me.
Thank you very much indeed, Kelly. Well, from Washington, we're going to go to Brussels and meet Lina. Lina, please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello and greetings from Brussels, from Belgium. So my name is Kolesnikova Lina, and I'm a security and crisis management consultant. So if you want to know my profile better, so I'm in LinkedIn. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Lina, and it's a good write-up there. Thank you. And finally, I'm very grateful to James because Bruce Brace had to drop out this morning through personal matter. And James has agreed to step in, who was instrumental, by the way, in helping me put it together. So, James, please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. Good to be here. Thank you, Martin, for inviting me. And I work for the IoT Security Foundation, which we want to make it secure to connect on the internet in every dimension, including cities. So we're very, very enthusiastic about this subject. I've also worked with Saab Sembi and Axis Communications on a white paper recently published on this very topic about trusting smart cities and what does the citizen think, and I'm looking at that dimension more. So delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And just for you to know, we're going to put details about that both in the chat, Shrey's just done that, and it'll be included in the blog that gets written up and will be on the website tomorrow. So we'll put more details out there. Right, let's go and hear what our panelists have to say. As those of you who join regularly will know, we invite each one of them in 3 minutes to say what they think the key issues are about this topic. I'm going to ask Kelly, who's going first, just to spend a few seconds, if you wouldn't mind, Kelly, just letting us know what a smart city is, because I don't think it's a given that everyone will understand. Kelly, over to you.
Thanks, Martin. I agree. You got to set the context. So smart city, by definition, is a technologically modern urban area that uses different type of electronic methods of communication and sensors to collect data. Now, what's the whole point of doing that? They want to make the environment safer, more efficient, and resilient so that people can not so much have access to everything, but be able to transverse for whatever they do in a safe and secure manner and be able to do it more efficiently and for ease of use. So what happens with that? Now that we understand a smart city is supposed to be technologically advanced to a certain extent, what does it do to us in terms of the way we're thinking? For my perspective on this, being an assessor, I look at it as, okay, what exactly is that going to do with endangering how communities operate? What is it going to do with regard to potential vulnerabilities? Does it make us more exposed to things? And I think that's what we'll, ultimately discuss, because being a smart city means things are interconnected. Before you get to being a smart city, we actually have disparate systems. And now we're having all our systems combined and integrated. So does that make us more vulnerable to attack or less vulnerable to attack? And I think it's a matter of we're eventually going to be all smart with regard to our cities and our technologies. But it's how we approach, well, how are we going to design that properly? Are we going to look and be thorough with regard to the threats and vulnerabilities and then the solutions that we're going to put in place? Are we doing it in such a fashion that allows us to grow as a society, but not become so much of a police state, so to speak? Because with cities being smart, that means access to information. That means access to your data. That means you're open to whatever may happen or what we've been seeing in a lot of things that go on today with regard to breaches. Now, one thing before we got into this discussion today, and I was telling the panel, I did a little research in terms of what are the top 10 cities in the world or top 10 cities in the United States in terms of smart city advancement. In the world, like Singapore, Geneva, London, and Seoul, Korea. In the US, you have New York, you have Dallas, you have Chicago, you have San Francisco. But if you look at that, okay, here we're discussing smart cities. But in 3 of those cities, at least within the states, what's actually going on with those cities? Are they being more efficient and technologically advanced, but at the same time, they are having loss of control with regard to how the cities are managed? So is one thing a part of the other, or is it an aspect of, do we think that that assists us in being more productive with what we're doing? It's a healthy discussion. It's a healthy thing. So are the threats being caused by some of the things that we put in place with regard to information and to data, or is it doing the opposite effect? And then how can we correct that and make sure that, it doesn't endanger folks and it actually fulfills the whole premise behind it being more resilient and more efficient for folks to use technology to what it's supposed to be intended to do.
Kelly, thank you very much indeed. So some thoughts from you, and we will pick up on these thoughts in the discussion. Don't forget, audience, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Someone's already texted me a question, actually, which I'll look at in a second. But let's get on a second panelist now. Lina, your opening thoughts on this topic, please.
Well, first of all, I want to add to Kelly's remark that there is no unique definition of smart city, and nowadays we have more than 160 different definitions of smart city, and I think that also doesn't help to common understanding, actually. So I want to share a little bit some concerns from European perspective, because I can't comment on America's experience or Asian. So first of all, when we talk about trust to technologies, we notice that it's not about trust to technologies. We because smart city is a combination of technologies, process and procedures. And you can actually have pretty good technologies and pretty good solutions, but in combination, and particularly in real life, so in operation and in multi-year experience, they can't be trusted, actually. Then we have another issue in Europe that many infrastructures, critical infrastructures, already have own software, hardware systems, equipment, which were not well updated or maintained, and then the systems were integrated into smart city system, which created huge problems, huge security issues for smart city as a, as a total, as a system. Another thing which I want to raise in the European experience, that because Europe is aging, we have a very I think very serious vulnerability, which not connected to security, but will lead to a security problem, that we have digital exclusion of population, digital literacy, and then these people become the target of criminal groups, criminal activities, and we'll have more of these issues. And another issue, which I think I really hope that we'll discuss, because I'm very, very concerned about governance. Before all the, previously we seen that such developments were very much under state control and audit as well. But now we have more and more technologies which are created by private sector. And if we look at the smart city as ideal public-private partnership, we assume that public, local authorities, etc., know what's going on in technologies and know how it works. But in reality, it's not what we have. That's topics which I really would like to discuss, because they are very important for European perspective.
Absolutely, Lina. Really, really good. And thank you for your thoughts. And clearly, some issues that we want to pick up on. And actually, the question that I've got does pick up on that. So let's go to our final panelist, though. And James. James, your thoughts on this topic, please.
Okay, Martin. I thought I'd take the approach of answering your questions, so I'll have to go. Yeah. So the first one, can technology be trusted, generally speaking? Well, we wrote a white paper recently, Saab Sembi and I, with Access Communications, and the link is there in the chat, where we looked at, can citizens really trust the technology they're being asked to use in a smart city? So it's interesting because, and Kelly mentioned Seoul. In Seoul, they've spent 20 years trying to work out how efficient and effective is all our super technology that we're sort of launching on everyone in 5G or in whatever they're doing. And they realized that a lot of people couldn't really use it as well as they thought they could. So they're having to spend time engaging with the citizen, which is the main thing, realizing that they can't just force it onto them. And not only this, there are actual technology cyber risks to these technologies that we're looking at. They're not secure. They're being, as Lina's saying, they're being manufactured by people that we don't know what they're doing with their technology and why they're doing it. We don't even know what the purpose of the technology is. And that's another problem. You know, what's it meant to be doing? And is it meant to be watching you, or is it meant to be doing something else that you don't even know about? So all these things are related to privacy. So one of the things you can do, which are good, are these data protection impact assessments, which, you know, looking at what can be done, and other things that we've looked at, which I recommend our paper, of course. The next question was, how serious are the threats? Well, I work with the IT Security Foundation, and we produced a document for facilities professionals in smart built environment. And the relevance of this is that because they are working in a smart building, their building is probably connected to another building and another building and a system of systems, which Kelly introduced us to, which make up a smart city. So you've just got to make sure that the governance, slightly different topic, but the governance of that building within the company is being examined. And so what we do in that document, which we've shown there, is we take you through governance, risk, compliance, and all the different controls that you should be looking at in a smart building as a facilities professional, and therefore also engaging with cyber and physical security people, as well as other stakeholders, to manage the risk. And then finally, there's two things there. Kaspersky, they highlighted in 2019 that 40% of buildings, 40,000 buildings, have been attacked. And the reason for the attack was to control the actual building automation system. So there is a concern. The threat is real. Some people think it's not really happening because they don't see it in the media much. But that doesn't mean the attacks aren't happening. And also you've got ransomware on the Colonial Pipeline, and other US cities have experienced big issues with ransomware. So that is a genuine cyber attack. Again, it seems, oh, well, people don't think it happens to them, but it has happened in the US particularly, and maybe Kelly can talk more about that. And finally, I think the security sector is doing quite well in some ways. The two things I'd like to draw attention to are the documents I reference are from the US, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, they've produced two fantastic documents, basically, which say you've got to do digital security by design and default. So basically, that means manufacturers are meant to be doing security by design and default, which we've been saying in the security field for 15, 20 years, but now it's being more front and center. And there's a lot being done by the US government in particular, and our government, and this European Cyber Resilience Act. And the other one is, in my favorite subject, the same group says security convergence, you must do this. So after all this, that's the strategic answer. So anyway, I'll finish there.
James, thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you to all of you for your comments. Let me go touch on back to you, Kelly, first, if I might. But I'm going to bring all three of you on this question. The problem, it seems to me here, which you've all outlined, is that this is making use of technology, and it's going the next stage. Actually, it's combining technologies and generating a lot of data. Now, the criminal world is getting very adept at exploiting gaps between technologies. Isn't this just a dream opportunity if you're a cyber criminal somewhere in the world? Because not it's in a building, you're in a city. And the second thing to say is, what confidence do you have that that could be countered? That we can introduce structures, measures, ways of governance that could mitigate the seriousness of this threat. So I'm going to ask all three of you this question. I think this is at the heart of the problem. Kelly, I'm going to come to you first, if I might, please.
Sure. Well, I think you nail it with the one word: exploitation. The criminals can exploit exactly what we have because the data sets and everything are combined and they're integrated. Now, with that being said, no technology is 100% secure. So we should be already taking measures as to, okay, if it's not 100% secure, then what are we doing? What are our processes? What are our procedures? I mean, one of the recommendations that actually some of the stuff that James mentioned, the documents there, is secure planning and design. So how is that design? How is that planning being done? And is it being done in a fashion that it can make you at least a little bit more confident that when you're using technology or using the systems, that it won't be breached and your information, your data won't be stolen? So I think things are being done efficiently, but at the same time, we just have to be aware that we have to follow procedures. We have to follow these best practices. And you just got to be understanding that in this technological world that we have, things are going to get disrupted. It's electronics. Things break, things get stolen. But if I think we take care to do our best and be thorough with our design and how we do it, then I think we'll be okay.
Well, Lina, do you think we'll be okay in that way? It's asking a lot of people who haven't always been okay up to now, surely. Lina?
Well, first of all, I think, of course, data nowadays it's a weapon. It's a huge money. Big data, it's a lot of money. So of course, it's we can't expect that it will not be touched by criminal groups and. Yeah, and particularly what's concerning that we are talking about a lot of sensitive data, and that's a big question, how this data collected, analyzed and stored, and this data is really protected. So I think I fully support that we need design standards defined, so that it should be the security by design from the beginning, from the scratch, but unfortunately, I'm a little bit pessimistic at this moment about European experience. So, but I think we are just at the beginning of understanding the future problems. I just want to say that if we'll have favors in smart cities, it means that these favors will be beyond what we already had. So that should be seriously taken by decision makers.
Okay, well, I'm sure we're going to come back to it. So, James, let me put this to you. Kelly's optimistic, Lina less so, maybe even in some elements pessimistic. Where do you sit on this?
I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
Always in the middle, but I'm positive as well, because I think there's a lot of good stuff going on with CISA and NCSC in this country. There's lots of good relationships there where they're promoting this sort of secure architecture. We're building better foundations in that the PCs and everything that the chips that we're going to buy in the future. I mean, in the meantime, we've got a bit of a struggle on because we're still trying to work out what's in the actual software. But what's coming down the line, and in September, is this software bill of materials, which means that you've got to define what's in the contents of all your software in the product, unless you do, and if there's any vulnerabilities in there. So that is making a big impact now on manufacturers. So they're having to think, oh no, I've got to actually address this if I'm going to be used in certain countries where this is a requirement. And so the Cyber Resilience Act, I know it's not actually in force yet in Europe, but when it comes into force, that means it will be better. But of course, it's not perfect. And of course, I can understand why people are concerned because, well, so what, anyone? And that's why we have the Converged Security Centre, you know, one of my favorite things where you can actually monitor things in real time.
Okay.
You could have all that stuff, but I won't go too much more on that. But.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate it. And I think this really, the three answers that you've each given epitomise the problem. But let's take this a bit further now. I'm going to come to you first, Lina. Frank Canham. I had a great chat with Frank this week, actually. We're talking to security professionals, but he's spoken about the role of architects, building designers, and planning authorities. And we've got to have faith in all of these, haven't they? They've all got to be on board, Lina. Otherwise, this falls apart. Impossible, Lina. It can't happen. They don't talk to amongst themselves enough, let alone to one another. This is, Frank's identified it. It can't work.
Yeah, I understand. But you see, what we see in Europe, again, I'm not talking about experience of other regions in the world. So that smart city is usually selling as a public-private partnership, that we have equal stakeholders. So, and all of them sit, talk, and create better cities, you know. And first of all, they create sustainable cities, yeah, because usually we say that we are going to have smart, sustainable cities in Europe. And yeah, that's correct. So all these stakeholders should talk, and it should be open discussion about vulnerabilities, about problems, because unfortunately we identify problems only when something happens. And another problem is that with a smart city, because it's a complex system, we have a lot of blind spots. It means that when you do risk assessment or vulnerability assessment, you don't see many things because it's just really complex. And you need, I mean, as a security professional, I need assistance of other professionals, and it should be open conversation. So.
Lina, you said yourself, well, let me not put words in your mouth, the public sector, does it know what it's talking about? I mean, you know, one of the big problems is, though, is that it's when you look at what security is being bought and the process of buying, and you hear public authorities not buying on quality, partly because of price driven and partly because of a lack of comprehension of what is quite a complex area. It's another major weakness, surely. You raised it.
Yes, so that's true. I think that the first thing that we have a huge gap of knowledge about these complex things. That's true. But, you know, I always share the opinion that nowadays, when you have so much cyber security, is not only security professionals, it's everyone. So as I always say, if your employee type the word password in the password, so you can't have security. You may write very good plans, but it doesn't work. So yes, that's true. And that's another thing that to get the not perfect, but at least work in a smart city, we should start smart city education. So, and we should start this education from decision makers, from all stakeholders, that they should understand what is it. But sometimes, you know, people who are involved don't understand. So that's the reality.
Well, let me come to you, Kelly, about this really important point about even if the technology can be trusted and even if it's well specified. The reality is, Kelly, that bringing all these stakeholders on board, despite what James says about convergence, it's all very well in theory, isn't it? But in practice, this is a serious issue, and one that requires a lot of coordination and expertise, where the example that's been set elsewhere in terms of public-private collaboration, our professional groups collaborating in the security sector, has been found often wanting. Kelly?
Well, I think Lina hits it in the last point. It's about education and awareness. It's about educating the public. Actually, Singapore is a prime example of how to do a smart city correctly. They educate their public, they put in and implement certain aspects of how they do their design, but do it in such a fashion where they also educate each one of their citizens as to why is this going to be used this way? How is it going to be used? I think, at least here in the States, we're deficient in terms of what we explain. Because then, like you've pointed out clearly, we have a lot of confusion. So what exactly is the clear path that we need to take? We have to better inform our public. We have to better inform the practitioners who implement a lot of these things. So to drive at your question is, it evolves all around what we know and what we perceive to know, and whether or not that message is clear and it's understood correctly. So it's like understanding risk. As an assessor, you always ask the client, well, what's the risk involved? Your definition of risk is going to be different than my definition of risk. So we have to have that collaboration, that communication with one another to understand what that is. And I think that's what has to occur here.
Okay, and James, let me come to you, because you've been a long time champion of convergence and bringing groups together, and both academically and researcher-wise, but also in terms of putting cases forward to a different audience. And I guess this would be the prime example, James, wouldn't it, of a smart city? Yeah. But research we both know of show that it has been found to be wanting. It's theoretically quite sound, right, bringing groups together. And I'm just wondering whether, in the complex of environments of a smart city, which you've all discussed and you've all mentioned, your own thoughts on the ability to impose some sort of governance of this to make it work. James?
Yes, well, I'm fortunately being assisted now by the US government cybersecurity agency and also protection of critical national infrastructure, which is pretty big. And they're saying that you must do this now because of the IoT attacks, the Colonial Pipeline one, for example, others along the way that we've seen. They're saying unless you actually do convergence, which is organizational one, I mean, or across buildings, not the technology itself is fairly converged in many ways, but unless you do that, you're not going to be able to survive an attack because you can't see it quickly enough to respond efficiently. So they're seeing that. They've been propounding it for a few years as well. And I think you're seeing a bit of a shift because of that. And Kelly helpfully mentioned about access control. That's quite a key area. We work with a company that does that sort of thing. And that's one way of doing it, is this monitoring. You can monitor organizations with technology. So technology is there now. So we're showing it, Converged Security Center, which I help out in the IFSEC, where you can show what the technology can do for you to enable convergence. So there's a difference now. There's more technology. It's not they're saying it's not the technology that's the barrier to monitoring and responding quickly. Now with AI, of course, we could bring AI in to help you actually understand all the data, because that's the benefit of AI, isn't it? So that you're there as a human being trying to respond and manage the risk, but the AI is helping you manage all the data, because how on earth can you see it all in real time? If all these systems we're talking about, which we are in a city.
Well, let me stick with you, James, on this question. I'll come to all of you a bit briefer if I might, because I want to get another couple of questions in. James, the Big Brother issue, right? Because you've just painted a point about the coordination, but it has been mentioned. But I just want to emphasize it, because one of the big concerns about where the security sector is going is that for many people, this ability to protect better is being lost by the genuine concerns people have about the Big Brother effect.
All right.
James, it seems a legitimate concern. How worried should people be, James?
Oh, okay. You've got to go for the which is well, I think if these projects that say Canada Toronto sidewalk project, which happened a couple of years ago, was stopped. Well, Canada's the city said it was stopped because of COVID. But yeah, okay. But the citizens themselves raised so many concerns about being watched and monitored, and what Google was doing. Well, a company owned by Google was doing to them, that they managed to stop the building taking place. A major part of the smart city, because they didn't engage with the citizens. And that's what South Korea learned, that you've got to engage with the citizens. That's what they try and do. That's their approach. They've got a much more mature approach, really, to be honest, about, and respectful of each other, because that's their culture more possibly.
Okay. Kelly, coming to you, Big Brother it seems a legitimate concern out there. I think it is. How worried should people be, Kelly, about this? About the danger seems severe here if we're not very, very careful.
Well, I think with anything, they should be very concerned. It's a matter of who manages your data. How is it managed? And again, to James's point, it's a matter of how are you addressing the aspect of what people know? I mean, we've seen it in our own elections here, as well as with, how certain things are done in conversations and how the message is kind of manipulated. So it's that aspect of, all right, if we're going for organizational resilience in what we're doing, and we're trying to inform or allow the public to use certain technologies properly, then what are we doing to inform them and engage in terms of education of what that is? And are we inhibiting them, at least here in the United States, on their rights? And every citizen should be concerned about that. Now, is Big Brother going to do other things? Well, there is that chance. I mean, nefarious things can happen. However, if we keep our eye on the ball, then we're more proactive than reactive to things, and we do educate the public, I think, that can be thwarted. But it is a concern, and people should be aware. But again, it draws back down to education and awareness.
Lina, Kelly just said we should be very concerned in the context. You agree, Lina?
Completely. That's why I mentioned governance, because, of course, all these technologies are following your, behavior patterns. So, and the question is, if this data used for something good, that's one thing. And then another thing is, of course, the security of this data. So if this data goes to the hands of criminal groups or malicious actors, or if some stakeholders will use this data for not this reason what they said, so what they mentioned, because how you can know that. So that's why I think, yes, that's absolutely legitimate concern of citizens.
And how confident, and you raised the governance issue in your opening statement, Lina, how confident are you that the governance of smart cities could be or is a match for the threat to people's personal liberties? In other words, how confident are you the governance of security? Because I'll come to you, James.
I think that I would be confident if smart cities will have the same control as nuclear industry. So like a real control, a real supervision. I think that's, for me, as a security professional, will be already enough. And I think if we can deliver this message to population that the data, the information is monitored and in hands of state, I think as nuclear industry. So I think that's already will be not bad. So
okay, James, over to you. I'm specifically, James. I'm looking at here the issue of whether the governance is fit for purpose and could ever be fit for purpose. James?
Well, only my particular thought was that in the COVID pandemic, which we're still just coming out of, that the South Korean government used their technology to isolate and quarantine cases and then treat them, get them better. But they used technology to do this. But they only used it for 30 days. They only kept the data for 30 days because there was a privacy concern raised by the people. and they decided they would help them and sort of say, well, look, we're only going to use your data for 30 days and then we'll remove it. So any privacy concerns you've got. And they said yes, because the fact was that they survived, and then 17,000 people, I think, now have died, compared to 220,000 in the UK, with a similar population, not much bigger.
But how do we know, Joe? Okay, but here's the point, I think. How do we know they did delete the data after 30 days?
We don't.
Well, they've got very strict privacy laws, more than...
Well, but this is assumption they obey the law.
Well, I think they did. Why wouldn't they?
Well, because we don't know, I suppose. I mean, this is the question.
There's a sort of cultural trust perhaps in the South Korean country, but they survived COVID better, so they got a better result than us anyway.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering whether, I mean, Lina, you're shaking your head there. Have you got, you see my point?
Yes, I think that we can do that only with public audit or just believe that. I think, yes, it depends on the culture, because if, for example, German government will say that the data is stored or deleted, so it will be just taken for granted that it's true. But yes, in some countries, probably it won't be enough, and so it will be necessary to have additional proof that that's true. That's the reality. Yeah. Even in Europe, in European scale.
Interesting points, and thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to a new question now. Kelly, you first. Eddie Sorrells, broad question, Eddie says, and clearly it's going to vary around the world, but it's a good question. Do the panelists think that many government leaders really understand the dynamics of smart cities and what is required from an infrastructure point of view, such as dependable Wi-Fi, and how to mitigate threats? And I guess the importance of this in terms of stakeholders, Kelly, is if governments don't get it right, then if the leadership, where the ultimate power lies, isn't engaged in this properly, it seems to me that we've got reason to worry. Kelly, how confident are you, and what's your answer to this question?
So I'd say it'd be about a 60-40 split. And what I mean by that is, certain portions of the government understand both, I'll say at least here for the United States or North America, of what goes on with regard to the technology. When we were mentioning governance, the governance can't be static. It has to be a living, breathing, and evolving aspect of what is done in process and procedures. But then in terms of the leaders itself, it's dependent upon how they're informed by the subordinates who are in charge of these certain things. So are they informed well? You can say yes and no on that. Because I don't think in some aspects, certain leaders aren't very informed as to what that is. They don't have the capacity, but then again, they're the ones that are organizing it, and they're relying upon the people who are the experts or the subject matter experts to be that catalyst of information and informing the public of how things go. Yeah, so it's a mixed bag, I believe.
Sorry, Joe. Sorry, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
James, Kelly's point, 60-40, the interest in my immediate reaction was, oh my goodness, that sounds awful. I mean, it sounds accurate, but awful. Do you agree with Kelly, and what's your take on this?
Well, I've got a more positive view, because I think the government here, we've got a digital security by design challenge, which is encouraging 120 companies to formulate better security architecture, and a new it's called Sherry Morello project, which is with Microsoft as well, where they're developing a more secure foundation for the computing we're using in the future.
But this is a question about government leaders, though, James. Whether you feel,
I mean, they had a Cyber UK event 3 weeks ago, where Oliver Dowden and other people were there. Tom, the security minister, they were all espousing their support for cybersecurity. And obviously protecting the critical national infrastructure. They've got a now threat level that they've installed, because they're concerned that there is a cyber threat to the critical national infrastructure in this country. So I'm encouraged in that respect. There is there's a department designated for cybersecurity and other security areas and again, CISA in the States are doing physical and cybersecurity together. They look at bombs and stuff, as well as not just cyber attacks. So they're looking at all things there. So there is a genuine concern.
I mean, of course, I'm interested to get your take on this, Lina. I mean, Brussels is a good place to be able to answer this Eddie's question about what government leaders think in Europe. What's your take on this, Lina?
Well, I can't comment on such high level, but okay, I used to work with local authorities of big European cities. First of all, it's a growing interest to smart cities in Europe. I think it was like last 5 years, but generally authorities understand smart cities as a possibility to solve some issues, urban issues. So not like a whole smart city, but to use some part of smart city technologies for solving some issues. But I would say that the understanding of possible threats is very low. So I think that the phrase that smart cities have a high risk of cascading effects not really understood properly, and for me it's quite concerning. But I think that the usual approach in Europe is something happens and then okay, lessons learned, and then so there is a move to something positive because of culture again. So.
Yeah, I mean, culture, right? A big issue on this, or big issue. Okay, listen, I want to just get a final thought on. Kelly, I asked you at the very start to identify a smart city, and it was very, very helpful. I guess the question is about we've got smart transport system, and we've got smart infrastructure sites, smart factories, smart buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Is city a lot more complicated in the sense it brings all them together? Would that be an accurate interpretation of what a smart city is?
I would think so, from a very not simplistic, but a very, listen, if everything's interconnected, then yes, and converge, as James points out.
Yeah,
it is. You're going to have smart buildings. You're still going to have analog buildings. You're going to still have things that have to be developed. So a smart city is an evolving thing from those other components, meaning the building, meaning the transportation system, meaning other aspects, say like water flow, how those systems work. So it's not one thing you just dump on. It's a gradual process that has to be developed. But in answer to your question, yeah, it is. And it's a matter of going through the necessary steps with a public-private partnership of, okay, how do we do this logically? How do we do this that will affect and improve lives as opposed to being scared of the whole Big Brother aspect?
Is there a shining example, Kelly, of a smart city? Is there a place that you would point to and say?
So like I said before, Singapore,
Yeah,
I think has the best example. Now, and it goes back to our discussion, it's about the culture. Our cultures, are we willing? Now, everybody has a rudimentary understanding of what smart city is, what smart things are, but it's how does it affect their lives is usually the question. The thing is not so much technology gives us access to everything. That shouldn't be the approach. It should be the approach of what can technology do to improve what we want to have done? And is it being approached in that fashion as opposed to a commodity?
Listen, panelists, fantastic. We could have gone on. So many great issues there. I mean, I came away from that in the middle thinking, oh my goodness, no. And then as time went on, I was thinking, oh, well, there are some good signs that the potential for good here is being well managed. But as you say, there's a lot of good things that can come out of this properly managed. So thank you. And I'm sure we're going to return to this. So thank you very much indeed for your input. A few final comments from me, if I might. Just to say that OSPAs are closing around the world. Romania on the 25th of May. Romania is closing imminently. So if you're in Romania, get your entries in. 14th of June if you're in the US. The 3rd of August if you're in the Benelux. And the Tax-Economic Crime Awards close on the 8th of August. There's some ceremonies going on tomorrow in Ireland. Here in Dublin. I'm in Dublin. I'm here for the Ireland OSPAs and Thought Leadership tomorrow. On the 7th of June, South Africa. On the 8th of June, Romania. So look out for find out who the outstanding performers are there. And we're back next Thursday. Now, normally we do this every 2 weeks, but June is Pride Month. And so next week we have a webinar specifically about Pride and the security sector. What next for the LGBTQ+ community? got an interesting discussion there about some of the key issues going forward and the role of security in it. So thank you once again to my panel. Fantastic conversation. Don't forget, a copy of this webinar and a blog to go with it will be on the website tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed to the audience. Thanks to Shrey in the background for being ready to intervene. And my colleague Charlotte Howe was also waiting in the background just in case the technology didn't work. And as I always end these webinars, wherever you are in the world, until we meet again, stay safe.